What is up, DegeNation? What is going on, DegeNation fam? We are here for the Week 12 main slate podcast, and we're coming at you live this week. It's a special edition. We're doing this on Saturday. We usually have this podcast already done and recorded. Kev would put it out for us, but because of the Thanksgiving holiday, we had to switch things up this week. So we are coming at you live on YouTube. So we appreciate everybody tuning in. We're excited to get into this Week 12 slate. We will have it recorded as well, so Kev will get that pushed out to everybody, and that will be set. But yeah, it's your host Ryan Alexander _W on Twitter is where you can find me, and then we got Kev Steele at Fantasy Route 13, Maddie Dickinson at Maddie _D_30, and like I said, this is here. We are here to talk about the Week 12 main slate podcast. Fellas, how we doing this week? It's the day before lock. We usually don't talk like this before it, so I'm interested to see where our processes are.
I'm doing good. I just got back in town from the Cowboys-Redskins game, so that was an awesome time. Had a blast in Dallas, visiting some family, ate some good food, got to see the Cowboys beat the Redskins, so can't complain about that Thanksgiving. Hope you guys had a good holiday yourselves.
Yeah, it was good for me, definitely. You know, it was awesome building those Thanksgiving lines. I think we all were in consensus that it's one of our favorite weeks of the DFS football season. I know it was a little bit sweeter for you and Kev with the Dan Arnold call. So luckily I survived what would have been a show pod bet on that, as I would have lost pretty admirably there with the Josh Hill to Dan Arnold comparison. But hopefully that worked out well for you, Kev.
It worked out awesome. That was amazing. Like that was take your pants off moment whenever Dan the Man just went wild, So that's what you get for trying to bet against me. Don't do that. I don't know how many times you have to lose. It's admirable that you keep going down that rabbit hole, but I mean, hey, when I'm on something, I'm on something. So, so yeah, me and Maddie killed it with that. And you how did Josh Hill do? Did he even have a target in that game?
Yeah, it's all right. We're fine. We're fine moving on from that. It's in the past. It's in the past. But we are going to let's talk about this Week 12 main slate and what we have going on here. A lot of interesting things on the slate. We got a couple questionable tags, a couple game time decisions that should be coming down early tomorrow morning. So I kind of want to talk plays with you guys, and I guess we can start at the quarterback position and see what we're doing this week. We don't have Pat Mahomes on this slate. We don't have Matt Ryan, Drew Brees. Those guys went on the Thanksgiving slate. So we got, guys who should be in some pretty decent spots. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of fanfare behind an Andrew Luck, who's just been hot as of late. The Colts are really reeling off the wins here, and he's been a big part of that. We got Tom Brady at the top on DraftKings, 6,500 going on the road against the New York Jets. And then Cam Newton is the third highest price there, who's obviously one of my favorite. I shouldn't say obviously, actually is one of my favorites at 6,200 on DraftKings. He's at home against the Seattle team that seems to just be giving up points in bunches. This is a game that definitely means a lot to the Panthers, as they kind of have hit a little bit of a snag here, losing a couple games in a row. And the interesting thing about Cam Newton for me is that the rushing upside seems to be at its high point when he is at home. 4 rushing touchdowns on the season at home. Other than that, his stats are pretty much similar. But if he's going to be giving me some rushing upside in this game at a $6,200 price tag, I really do like that matchup. And he's got a lot of weapons that you can pair him with. Other than that, at the quarterback position, I have some interest in Baker Mayfield at Cincinnati, 5,500. But he's just kind of hard to determine who you want to play him with. But in his pass attempts and before the week against Atlanta had actually, been in the high 30 range and even getting to 40 there. So, if he's going to be seeing that many attempts and he's going to be passing that much against this Cincinnati defense, who's kind of been exposed as of late, he really interests me. And he offers you some rushing upside there with his legs as well too. And I'm really just not that excited about too many other options at quarterback. So it's probably going to be Cam Newton at the top for me. I definitely will be sprinkling in some luck with some unique stacks, I feel like, because I'm not sure how high on TY I am this week. And then trying to get Baker with some of his guys there. But I'm curious to see how you guys feel about Mullins going against Tampa Bay. Is on the road, but we know what this Tampa Bay defense is giving up to quarterbacks. So I want to hear your guys' take on the quarterback position and see where you're at. Kev, I'm going to start with you this week and see where your process is leaning you to.
Yeah, so I want to start with Tom Brady because I think that, most weeks, especially without Gronk, like he hasn't really been in play for, I think, a lot of people. Though this week, I think he does sit atop the pool of quarterbacks at 6,500. But he's probably one of my favorite plays on the slate. I don't think he's going to carry much ownership. Coming off the bye, playing the Jets, they do get Gronk back this week, or it sounds like he's going to be he's going to play. And one of my really favorite stacks of the week is really going Brady and Gronk, and I don't think it's going to have a ton of exposure to it. With some of these other plays, I know I've heard a lot about Andrew Luck this week, and I think he makes some sense, which is weird because Andrew Luck has 7 weeks in a row of throwing 3 or more touchdowns, and he really hasn't been much in the conversation of plays. But for me, I think it starts with Tom Brady. Like I said, I think Brady and Gronk stack is my favorite on the slate. Then you have Jameis Winston at 6K, which is very risky because you never know if is he going to play the whole game, because they continue to pull the quarterback, and every time it happens, the quarterback they pull ends up coming in and giving you 15 to 20 DK points. So I do really like Jameis though at 6K. I think he's a nice pivot off of the Andrew Lucks, who is going to be very, very popular. So I'm going there. And then, down in the lower range, I definitely think, like you mentioned, Baker is in play. I would have been more excited about playing Andy Dalton had he had AJ Green, but it sounds like AJ Green will be out this week, which kind of hurts him. And I think the other guy that I think is somewhat interesting is Lamar Jackson at 5,700 going against Oakland. The dude can't throw. Like I'm not convinced that he's ever going to actually be like a good quarterback. He's like a running. He's almost like a little bit better Tim Tebow in my opinion. Super athletic guy, but I just don't think he's ever going to develop into much of a quarterback. But because of his rushing upside, that can get you that 100-point bonus. And if he can somehow find a way to toss a couple touchdowns going against a terrible Oakland defense, one of the worst defenses on the slate right there with Tampa Bay, is Tampa Bay's defense. So I think for me, it'll probably pretty concentrated on Tom Brady, Winston, and Lamar Jackson. I'll sprinkle in some of those other guys like Eli Manning, who I think also has a terrific matchup going against the Eagles. Eagles secondary is absolutely just ripped apart right now. I mean, it's insane how bad their secondary looks right now. I mean, they're pulling guys off the street, putting them out there. So I think that's kind of where I stand this week. Maddie, where are you at?
I'm in the same. I mean, my top 2 guys are the same as 2 of the guys that you're on. I love Winston and I love Eli this week. It feels both of those guys kind of feel gross, but I think they're both playable in all formats. I mean, you look at the Bucs, who are averaging 41 attempts per game from the quarterback position, regardless of who's under center. And it seems like whenever they decide to make a change at QB, whoever is next up, they let them go the whole game no matter what. So, I mean, no matter who is in the game at quarterback for the Bucs, they're going to throw interceptions. That's just the nature of the aggressiveness of the play calling. I mean, it's an air raid, throw it downfield style offense. And I mean, you're naturally going to have interceptions come from that type of offense. So, but I mean, you also have that's a fantasy goldmine as well. And you have people who are probably going to be scared off Winston this week because of the possibility that he does get benched. I just don't see him getting benched here this week, though. And I mean, it's a decent matchup against the 49ers. The one guy on the 49ers defense in the secondary who's played really, really well is Richard Sherman. And he's going to be matched up with Deshaun Jackson most of the game, as Jackson lines up on the right side over 50% of the time. And I think speed is the one thing that can actually burn Sherman a little bit with that Achilles injury. He's been lockdown corner for the most part this year, but he's much better against receivers that are bigger and slower, and he can use his physicality that way. So I think that there's not a bad matchup across the board for the Bucs, and I think Winston will be able to exploit that. And then Eli, I mean, it's pretty simple. The Eagles are basically on all second string secondary here. The report said this week that they had to use wide receivers to play cornerback in practice because they were that thin in the secondary. So, I mean, if any of those guys goes down this week, or even if they don't, it's just such a good matchup for Eli. And that Eagles front seven is still somewhat respectable. So if Barkley can't get it done on the ground, they'll just start dumping it off to him and hitting OBJ wide open. OBJ is going to run free in this game, and I just don't see a way that the Giants don't put up points here, as gross as that feels to say.
Yeah, Maddie, I guess my concerns with the two plays that you have is that I thought we were going to see the height of what Eli Manning could do last week in that matchup. And he still is just struggling to play the position, I guess, for lack of a better term, to find guys while they're open and hit. And even, as he was decent enough to get them to win. And obviously they had a lot of great work behind Saquon there. I just don't know what the upside is that we can expect from him in a matchup that does look juicy on paper. And as well, he has kind of fared well against this Philly team in the past, but that was when they really didn't have that established of a running game. So I guess I'm just determining what the production would be that Saquon would get in this game versus an Eli for upside.
Yeah, so, I guess I should have mentioned too that Eli's more in play on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings, because he's basically the same price as Winston and all those guys on DraftKings. He's $5,700 and Winston's $6K, and you have like Baker who's cheaper than him on DraftKings. But on FanDuel, he's one of the cheapest quarterbacks this week. And that's where I want to play him. And it's just, for me, it's just the Eagles are they're a shell of themselves. They're not the Eagles defense right now. So I think you can kind of get away with attacking name value there. And checking ownership too. Everybody, like OBJ and Barkley, are the top two projected owned players this week. And then Eli is like not even in the top 5 quarterbacks, which doesn't make sense to me. So everybody's loading up on the Giants' skill players, but not the quarterback.
Mm.
So in regards to last week, though, I mean, Eli only had 18 attempts. I mean, and he still threw for 231 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, the dude was ultra efficient with his touches. He had one of his highest, averages of 12.8 yards, per pass last week. So, I mean, he definitely had probably his best game of the year in terms of just being efficient. Completed 17 of 18 passes, 231 and 2 touchdowns. So,
right.
Obviously, it wasn't what you were looking for. But if I remember correctly, the Giants got up pretty quickly on them, and then that's when they removed Ryan Fitzpatrick and put Jameson, and they had to jump up, and then it was kind of a comeback after that. But with only 18 attempts, I mean, if you go back to his weeks prior to that, I feel like that the Eagles, I think, will right the ship a little bit, and they'll have to throw the ball more. So, I mean, the weeks prior, he had 31 attempts, 47, 38, 43, 36, 41. I mean, if you would have had that last week, I mean, he would have thrown for, it could have ended up throwing for 400 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns, had he, had to throw the ball. He just didn't have to last week. So I will mention that on paper, it didn't look great, but he didn't kill you if you played him last week. And then, like I mentioned, he was only 5,200 this week, and he really does have one of the best matchups on the slate, in my opinion. So, I mean, I get the not wanting to play him because it's Eli Manning, but in terms of just overall matchup, I find it very hard that he's going to be able to fail in this matchup.
I hear you. It definitely makes sense. It just worries me. I mean, last week was Tampa Bay. So, I mean, the efficiency numbers, you're going to get that with the Tampa Bay defense, the way that they're playing. This one on the road in Philly, The Eagles aren't really in the hunt right now, but I mean, they're still playing for pride. And I just, those are divisional games and they could go either way. So even though the secondary is banged up, you still have that front seven there for Philly who, can still get something against the offensive line. That's just my concern with it. But
I did just want to say real quick, I guess, we're still sort of waiting for the news, but if Melvin Gordon does not play, do you guys have more interest in Phillip Rivers at home against Arizona? Because I do think they'll probably try to throw the ball more, without Melvin Gordon in the lineup. Would he be coming onto your guys' radar without Melvin Gordon?
Yeah, I think you have to consider him if Melvin sits. Because, I mean, we saw, what was the game in London when Melvin sat out and Eckler got the start? And I think that was against Tennessee. But Eckler didn't do hardly anything on the ground with that start. Like, he was average at best, which is, I mean, Eckler is a role player. Like, he's a guy, he's not meant to carry a full load. He's not meant to go out and get you 20 to 25 touches. He's meant to touch the ball maybe 8 to 10 times and be involved in the pass game as an explosive gadget player. And yeah, I think if Melvin sits out, then you can absolutely play Rivers.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
I mean, I guess it could kind of limit their efficiency as an offense.
Yeah, that's kind of what concerns me a little bit about it.
And Arizona has been very good against the pass this year. But with that being said, Rivers is still a talented quarterback, and he can still go out there and throw for 275 and 2 or 3 touchdowns. I don't hate it.
No.
I mean, I don't think it vaults him to the top of the board for me, but I don't hate it, especially in tournaments.
So where would you rank then? I guess let me ask this: where would you rank in terms of like the quarterbacks that are in the $600 to $5,700 range? Because there's Winston, Wentz, Rivers, Lamar Jackson, and Eli. Of those guys, where would you rank them on DraftKings? Let me say that.
For like in terms of ceiling?
Yeah, just GPP play.
I'd say Winston probably has the highest ceiling because he's got 400-yard, 4-touchdown upside. And then I would say probably Russell Wilson's the next highest at 5,600. I think he's got the next highest ceiling. But I just don't know about his rushing upside against Carolina. They've been pretty good at limiting quarterback rushes, but they've been kind of shredded through the air this year. And I think they're kind of an overrated defense as a whole. But a lot of Russ's ceiling comes from when he does run the ball, and Carolina's limited that pretty well. And then I'd probably say Wentz or Eli, and then Rivers and Lamar. I don't know. I need to see more of Lamar before I can just anoint him a 30 to 35 point ceiling. Because like if his rushing isn't there, like, and Oakland's limited rushing quarterbacks as well this year. So if his rushing isn't there, then I mean he's not going to do much through the air, regardless of how good the matchup is.
Yeah, we have Corey Vulcan in chat right now watching on YouTube. Shout out to Corey. He's a DFS DegeNation member. Corey's talking about playing Lamar Jackson locked in cash. I'm assuming, Maddie, you are wary about that?
I mean, the rushing upside or the rushing floor is nice for cash. But I think it was a little nicer last week because he was down in the 4K range, like 4.6 or 4.7. And now this week, I mean, if he gets you 20 DK points like last week, yeah, that's fine. That works. But I just don't think he has the upside that Winston has. And I think Winston still has a 15 to 20 point floor. Like Winston is more likely to get a 30 to 35 point score while still also has a 20 point floor in a bad game.
Right.
So in cash, I'd rather just go there where instead of hoping that Lamar somehow reaches 20 for $300 cheaper.
Unless Winston gets benched, because we've seen this movie a time or 2 or 3 or 4 throughout this season already.
I mean, if Winston gets benched, I'm going to lose all my money. But I'm planning on him not getting benched. They're playing at home. If this was on the road, I'd be a little more weary. But they're playing at home. And Winston already came out and said this week that he's extremely motivated to show the franchise that he's a franchise quarterback and that they can rely on him in the years going forward. So I think he's going to have a big game personally.
Okay. Narrative street there. We haven't talked about him, but Carson Wentz, I think it would be one of it's just so hard to get off this guy at 5,900. I'm looking at him, and if people don't want to play him because of his 3-point performance in New Orleans, which was for sure anomaly for this guy, just the whole offense looked dead and not ready to play and definitely underperformed. And so for a nice bounce back spot with what should be very low ownership on a guy who can definitely perform. You're looking at the games before that. He had, I believe, 6 or 7 straight games with 20 plus DK points. Like, I'm not concerned with Carson at all this week.
Yeah, no, I don't hate Carson either. My one issue with Carson is if I play him, I'm all in on the Eagles offense because I'm playing Josh Adams. That's my only concern with Carson Wentz is how much Eagles exposure do I want?
Well, let's get into running backs then, Maddie, and let's talk about this because we have, a couple of interesting, questionable tags with some guys like Melvin Gordon, Sony Michel, Alex Collins, who are all in good matchups that I really like. So it's gonna be interesting to monitor. But you bring up a Josh Adams who just had a breakout game that past week against New Orleans and carries a $3,800 price tag. So not much of a difference there because we know how these slates already get preset. So there wasn't time to increase his price there, but coming off of a 16.2 performance there, 3,800. I mean, how you said you're locking him in, but like for somebody who's maybe multi-entering or somebody who likes to get contrarian, and Kev, I'd love your take here too. Like how much Josh Adams is too much Josh Adams for you, or is this just one of those opportunities where we just take advantage of the low price tag that he has and just say, you know what, we're going to be different elsewhere?
Yeah, I personally think it's a free square. Like there's good chalk and there's bad chalk, and I think this is good chalk. And I don't even know if he's going to be that chalky just because there's some pretty good running backs this week in good matchups. But yeah, like you said, like he was the lone bright spot of the Eagles offense last week. And going against New Orleans, they're one of the best defenses at defending the run in the NFL this year. Over the last 4 weeks, the Saints have only given up 54 yards per game to running backs, and a lot of that came because of Josh Adams. And now Adams gets a matchup against the Giants, who I've been wanting to attack ever since they traded away Snacks to the Lions. I even played Peyton Barber against them last week. Barber had done nothing all year, and he ran for over 100 yards and a score last week against the Giants. I mean, they're just a bad run defense without Snacks Harrison in there. And over the last 4 weeks, they're giving up 135 yards and a touchdown on average to the running back position. So I just think 3,800 is a free square, and I'm not getting cute. The Eagles are struggling on offense. It's a good excuse for them to kind of use one running back and get a guy a hot hand here. And even if they were to go by a committee, 3,800 is still too cheap.
Yeah, I think it's interesting this week.
Go ahead.
I think there's a number of options in this range. So I think it suppresses some ownership, especially if we get Melvin Gordon ruled out. Then I think Austin Eckler becomes make a chalk at 3,700.
Right.
But with Josh Adams, like I was surprised that he's only 3,800. He's kind of taken over the last couple of weeks. I really had a pretty solid week last week. Albeit how bad that train wreck was in Philadelphia, in New Orleans there. So I was surprised that he was only 3,800 in this matchup. But if you didn't want to play Josh Adams, I think there's some other options like Gus Edwards. I guess we really haven't talked about going against Oakland. I mean, he just sort of came out of nowhere. He did get a lot of run in the preseason, but the rest of the regular season, I mean, he had one game, I think, against the Titans where he had 10 carries, I believe it was. But other than that, he'd done nothing all year. And then out of nowhere, which made some sense, though, because I will say this, Alex Collins has been a bum this year. Like, I mean, he has done nothing. And so I do think that he's in play. It is a little scary because you never know, if this is going to be a hot hand situation where, I still think Alex Collins has a role, but So it's going to be interesting because I do think that Gus Edwards is very interesting going against the Raiders, who have one of the worst defenses in the league. So I definitely think you could play him if you wanted to at 4,400. So I think there's quite a few guys here. Like I said, Gus Edwards, and then Josh Adams, and then Austin Eckler, especially. And speaking of Austin Eckler, though, I would almost rather Melvin Gordon play than not play, because I feel like there's an opportunity here where the Chargers can get up on the Cardinals quickly, and where they bench Melvin Gordon, get him out of the game if he does play, where he's not going to have the same because even and we've seen it with Eckler this year, where he's been a decent flex option on a lot of weeks, where I definitely think that this would be another week where you could look at him and he's cheaper than what he has been. Normally he's around the $4,400 range. Now he's down to $3,700. So I do think even if he plays Melvin Gordon, I do think Eckler's in play. So of these lower priced guys, though, I definitely think Josh Adams is in play. I think he would probably be number one for me in terms of the low ownership. Gus Edwards would be two. And then I still would play Peyton Barber at 3,900 going against San Francisco. You can definitely run on San Francisco, and nobody's going to play Peyton Barber. And so I do think he's also an option as well.
Yeah, this is just a week for me where I usually try and get the 4 receivers on DraftKings, get one in the flex. But this is a week for me where I think I'm going to have to play 3 running backs just because of the situation that Josh Adams is in. Because I love some of these high end running backs, and wide receiver just is not one this week that I really feel like I need to pay up for. I mean, if you want to take Odell, and we'll talk about that with wide receivers, but I won't argue with you. But I just think like some of these running backs are just in great spots. I mean, you look at James Conner here, he's in a good bounce back spot. It's on the road for Ben, so you never know what that situation is going to be like. I know he's fared fairly well in the past couple games that he's had on the road, but this still matches up for James Conner here going against a Denver team that the way you attack them is on the ground. And, another team that you attack on the ground is Seattle. And I just can't get off of Christian McCaffrey. I do like Cam. He's one of my favorite running backs. And this is a Seattle team that's given up 22 DK points in 3 straight games. So you see a Christian McCaffrey there who's pretty much a Swiss Army knife in this offense, doing it all. And, has really just been a standout this year. From a fantasy perspective, I just think this is a spot he smashes in. And then Joe Mixon, who, has already played Cleveland before, not this year, but last year. He carved him up for 114 yards, had 3 catches for 51. And if AJ Green's not going to be in the game, like, this is a guy who I want to definitely load up on, because there should be points scored in bunches in this matchup here. So I'm definitely liking getting these high priced running backs in the field. And then definitely, Melvin Gordon with this Q tag already lingering into Saturday, people have already set their lineups. Like, if he gets ruled in to play, I don't know how many people necessarily are going to jump to pivot onto him. So I'm definitely trying to find ways that I can, get Melvin Gordon there in my lineups in a flex spot or in the running back spot, where I can, figure out ways to pivot off of him if he's out to some of these high priced guys. But if he plays, like, I'm going to want him at the ownership, which is going to be way too low.
Yeah, I think all those guys make sense for sure. I don't know if you guys touched on Nick Chubb at all, but
no.
He's my favorite play on the slate.
Yeah, he's my top running back, maybe overall. Like, I just don't get why he's priced down this low. 6,300 on DraftKings, that also feels like a free square to me. I mean, the Bengals defense has been so bad, especially recently. They're giving up 149 yards and 1.7 rushing touchdowns per game over the last 4. So I don't know. Chubb's had 20 or more total opportunities, carries plus targets in his last 4 games. Ever since they got rid of Hyde, they've let him take over, and he's the guy. And this Bengals defense is just so bad. And we saw Lamar and Gus Edwards just destroy them last week. So I'm just going to lock in Chubb and Josh Adams, and that's where my lineups are going to start. And then if I want to get a little weird, it's not even that weird either. He's just going to be low owned. Is Marlon Mack? I love Marlon Mack this week against the Dolphins.
Yeah.
I mean, we've attacked the Dolphins with running backs all year. Mack has kind of taken a hit in terms of volume over the last 2 games, which is why he kind of hasn't hit his ceiling. But this feels like a game where they can rely on him a little more. And I actually saw somebody tweeted out, I can't remember who it was. I saw it this week when I was traveling. But the Colts are actually playing at one of the slower paces over the last few weeks, whereas they were playing at this insanely high pace to start the year. So that kind of has me off Luck and onto Mac a little bit more, because I think they can get out in front here at home and run the football. And the Dolphins, I mean, having to rely on that offense to score points is just not something that really makes me very confident in wanting to roll out Andrew Luck. So I think Mac is a great pivot off of Luck in an environment where they should still put up a ton of points, and you can run the ball on the Dolphins. And Mac is 5,500 on DraftKings. He's also underpriced.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the guys I had written down too, Maddie. Him and Adams just unlock so much for salary relief for you building your lineups. But I do say, like, the thing that really interests me about Mac, as contrarian as he's going to be, is to pair him up with Luck, because we know that, you know, Luck is just carrying this offense right now, as I alluded to, and it's just so interesting because you don't really need to. I mean, last week you saw it worked out with T.Y. Hilton, but you really don't ever need to pair him with anybody, because he's kind of like Drew Brees in the sense where, like, he'll just get it to whoever is open, and it's not really just going to be one guy. Like, this guy has so many weapons to throw to, and I could definitely see him throwing one to Mac in this matchup. And, you know, if he's going to get, you know, 3 scores to 300 yards, and then Mac is going to get some work if they're up big in this game, it's just one of those game theories that I like to target. And the quarterback position we talk about is just so up in the air. There's really nobody who really ends up, you know, the scoring is just so close together. So I think if I can get, you know, 25, 27 points out of Luck with Mac having a big game, I think that's going to set you up in definitely a great spot. And yeah, like you said, Aaron Jones just pretty much had his way with him the previous game that Miami had. So just makes a ton of sense to get to him. Kev, what else are you thinking at the running back position before we move on?
Yeah, so I would love to play Saquon this week, but at $9,100 price tag, I just don't know if I'll get there. And like I think Maddie mentioned earlier, the Philadelphia, their front seven is still very, very good. So I don't think you need to go there at 9,100. And if we don't have Melvin Gordon, I think it kind of makes things pretty interesting here, because I do think James Conner is in play. It would be like with James Conner, it's interesting because he's 7,800, which seems way too low for the production that he's given you this year. He's had a couple rough games, but other than that, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. I kind of look at it the same way every week. Is if that said Le'Veon Bell at $7,800, you're smashing him into your lineup. He's the best player on the slate, and he's given you that same production that Le'Veon Bell has all year. So I don't really understand the it seems like most weeks most people aren't really super high on James Conner, and it's kind of insane to me. So at 7,800, I am loving James Conner at 7,800. And then, kind of going down, I think you can definitely play Joe Mixon, especially without AJ Green. I think he's in play at 6,800. He's a little bit lower than what we've seen him lately. Nick Chubb, like you mentioned, I'm not going to go create, long on that, but Nick Chubb is definitely one of my favorite plays on the slate. Cincinnati, their run defense has been atrocious. I think they've given up over 400 yards rushing the last 2 weeks. So it's just bad. So he's in play. Matt Breida at 5,700. Alfred Morris is awful. Breida seems to be the guy there now, as long as he can stay healthy. I mean, every game the dude seems to get knocked out and he comes back in. I mean, I don't know what's going on there with him, but Tampa Bay, their run defense is horrible. They're top 5 in fantasy points allowed to the position. So you can definitely get in on him. I like the Marlon Mack call. And then from there, it's kind of the cheap guys we've sort of talked about. So in terms of roster construction, I mean, I think you can easily kind of play almost kind of whoever you want building. And I almost think that, it's a viable week if you want to sort of pay down into this, tier of the 6K, the 5K, running backs, and then paying up at wide receiver if you'd like, because there's, without Todd Gurley on the slate, without Alvin Kamara, without Kareem Hunt, there's not a lot that just ultimately stands out to me as just smash plays. And like I said, I think for me, it's going to be James Conner, and then Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb for the high price guys. And then if I'm paying down, it's going to be Gus Edwards and Josh Adams, and then some Peyton Barber, and possibly, if I really want to get weird, maybe some Elijah McGuire going against the Patriots. So.
Okay. I see you there, Kev. We haven't talked about the New England situation, so I just want to touch on it real quick before we move on to wide receivers. James White, Sony Michel, if he plays, are these guys going to find their ways into any of your lineups or builds? Or Kev, I heard you talking about Tom Brady. You loved him earlier when we were talking about quarterbacks. You pair him with a James White, so to speak, try and pair him with Sony Michel to get all the points there, or are you not interested in either one of these guys this week at their price tags?
For me, no, especially on James White at 7,400. I mean, he's the the fifth highest price running back on the slate on DraftKings. I can't do it. I think now with Gronk back, I think it changes a lot. I think we're going to have Julian Edelman. You have Josh Gordon. You have all of these guys to get the ball to. So I do think that hurts James White. And I don't think this is a week where they really need to, utilize him as much. Sony Michel's interesting. And then next week we'll probably get Rex Burkhead thrown into the mix as well. So it'll be interesting to see. But I probably won't have a ton. I think if I was going to pay for one of them, I'll pay for the cheaper one and go Sony Michel at 5,800. But I just don't think you need to, because at the same price range, I like Matt Breida more, I like Nick Chubb more, and I like Marlon Mack more, and all in that kind of all in that same little price range there. So I won't have much. Maybe in like the 12 o'clock only slate that I'll be playing a lot of. Maybe I'll have a little bit there, but on the main slate, no, I probably won't have much.
Okay, fair enough. Wide receiver, let's talk about that. This position, very, very interesting. This is usually where we see lineups start to get really different, I would say, because there's 3 slots there, 4 if you play one in the flex. And I'm curious to see where you guys are leaning, because I just feel like this week amongst any, it's pretty wide open. You got no Julio, you got no Michael Thomas. You really got Odell and Antonio Brown, who are the 2 8K guys. And then you got Mike Evans not too far behind him, which this is this is a great week for Mike Evans now that we know that Jameis Winston is the quarterback. Mike Evans was struggling in that game with Ryan Fitzpatrick last week, and Jameis comes in and then he goes bananas and really breaks up in the slate with a 33 DK point performance. So I definitely love Mike Evans at the top there at a $7,700 price tag. Granted that my running backs are cheap enough to get me there. Keenan Allen definitely becomes interesting to me if Melvin Gordon sits. He's a target hog in this offense. Really has been pretty consistent since the bye that they've had, with 224 DK point performances, that 17-point performance against Oakland, and then at least six catches in either one of those games, or every one of those games. So I definitely love that. Josh Gordon once again is sticking out to me at 6,400 in this matchup against the Jets. I just don't think they have anybody who can guard this guy. Tom Brady's getting him acclimated. He's got the locker right next to Tom Brady in the locker room. I just see him having a game. He's only $6,400, and New England's on the road here. I'm not sure how many people will lean to him. So I'm going to have a ton of Josh Gordon this week. Jarvis Landry is another guy who just is finding his way into my builds. He's only 5,900 going against the Cincinnati team, who is getting pretty much annihilated by wide receiver ones on the year until last week when they played the Ravens. And Lamar Jackson, I think, can speak to that, as he didn't really throw that much in that game. But before that, they were just getting obliterated. Jarvis Landry really has been quiet since that Tampa Bay matchup. But this is a game where I think he should definitely have his way in on DraftKings, especially with him being 5,900. I believe he can pay off that price tag pretty easily there. And a nice guy that I like to pair with Baker. Sterling Shepard kind of disappointed me last week. I've had a ton of him going against Tampa Bay. I'm considering going to the well again with him at 5,300 for the reason that you said, Maddie. Like the secondary is banged up. They're 30th against wide receivers. He definitely has a role in this offense. His snap share proves that. And I'm not sure how many people will be trying to play him. So I'm looking to get exposure to that game there. And then I want to talk about this Seattle situation. We got people in the chat talking about how they like Russell Wilson this week in that game that I think could probably have some sneaky upside doing a game stack there. I've just been looking to stack it from the Carolina perspective only and then running it back with a piece or two on the Seattle side. But these guys, Doug Baldwin and Tyler Lockett, are priced right up against each other. And Carolina, the cornerbacks, they really have done well, I feel like, in stopping the wide receiver 2, but the wide receiver 1 has kind of been the one to kind of get loose on them. It's just a matter of who you consider a wide receiver 1 in this offense, if that's Doug Baldwin or Tyler Lockett. I think a lot of people are leaning towards Doug Baldwin, obviously being that person, but he's got a Q tag on him with the game time decision with the growing injury. So I guess I'm leaning Lockett right now, but I'd be curious to see what you guys think about that game. And then I want to open up the conversation too with DJ Moore, who I've seen just a ton of articles in the DFS community come out about this guy. Obviously that situation is open now. Devin Funchess is expected to miss the game from what I believe. And they're really loving him there in Carolina. So he's getting just a ton of work right now and really is just outperforming his presence there. So I definitely have interest in him because he's just so cheap, but because he's chalky, and we've seen some of these times when the wide receivers are chalky not pay off, it does scare me a little bit. So Maddie, what are you thinking about with wide receivers, and where are you going this week?
Yeah, so just real quick on DJ Moore. I just don't think he's good chalk. I mean, when have we ever seen Cam Newton be able to consistently throw to a wide receiver week in and week out where that wide receivers reach ceiling potential to warrant playing him at mega ownership? Like I get the excitement around the kid. He's a rookie, he's explosive. But again, it's Cam Newton. Cam Newton never just locks in on one guy. Cam will look to scramble. He'll dump off to McCaffrey. He'll throw to Olsen. I know there's no Funchess this week, but I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like DJ Moore is just, he's a trap this week, especially, and feels like chasing points after the week he had last week. But I speaking of D Moore, the other D Moore is the one I want to play. I want to play David Moore of Seattle.
Oh, here we go.
I mean, Carolina, that defense is overrated in my opinion. And it looks like Baldwin's going to miss this game because he practiced in no capacity at all this week. And if that's the case, Lockett moves into the slot, and then David Moore sticks out on the outside as the main outside guy. And he's seeing 15.6 air yards per target, and that's by far the most on the team. So this Carolina team has struggled to defend the pass all year. I think they're an overrated defense. We saw Pittsburgh absolutely annihilate them 2 weeks ago. And if Baldwin does sit, I think Lockett is a great play, and you can even play him in cash because slot receivers have torched the Panthers recently. Bruce Ellington in his first game with the Lions last week went 6 for 52. Juju 2 weeks ago went 3 for 91 and a score. And then Humphreys the week before that went 6 for 82 and 2 scores. So, I mean, these little slot receivers are giving the Panthers some trouble. So I think Lockett is a great play. And I kind of hope Baldwin doesn't play so that we get a healthy slot receiver in there against the Panthers. And then you can fire up some Lockett. Outside of that, if I asked you guys, how what would you say Antonio Brown is on the list of highest projected wide receivers this week in terms of ownership? Where would you guys slot him in without looking?
Probably 5 or 6, maybe, is where I'd have him at.
Fanshare has him at 11th.
Wow.
As the 11th highest owned projected wide receiver. To me, that's too low. Anytime you get a guy with that talent, it's too low. And Denver, you can attack Denver through the air. They're not this shutdown secondary anymore. Ever since they got rid of Talib, like you can attack them on the outside. They still have Chris Harris in the slot, which takes me off Juju a little bit. But I mean, Antonio Brown gets the best matchup of the offense outside of James Conner. So while everybody's paying for Odell, as he's projected to be the highest owned wide receiver at 25% this week, I think the pivot is Antonio Brown at the same price and arguably just as good of a matchup with a better quarterback. Granted, they are on the road in Denver, but I just think anytime you can get AB at that suppressed ownership, that it's worth taking a shot on. And then I do love the Josh Gordon call. I won't go too far into that, but he is one of my top plays this week as well. So
that's interesting about Antonio Brown. I don't remember when it was, a couple years ago. Might have been the last time Pittsburgh faced Denver, but I do remember him torching that secondary. He had a huge game, went for 2 touchdowns. I'm not sure how many yards he had, but pretty sure well over 100. So just to say that he's been good in this matchup before. That might have been a home game, but still at that, if he's going to be that low owned this week, I'm going to have to find some ways to get him in. It was the same thing with me last week. I added about 12 to 15% of him, even though he was going against Jacksonville. I didn't carry Antonio Brown, so I always have to have exposure to him. Kev, what say you this week, and where are you going? I know you've kind of faded DJ Moore in the past too, when he's been in similar spots of being chalky. So I want to hear your take on that, and then let us know how you're feeling about these Patriots pass catchers. If you're targeting Tom Brady, who are you going to?
Well, like I said, I think I'll probably have a fair amount of whether it be Gronk. I'll have probably some Julian Edelman at 7K, and then I could never not play Josh Gordon. It's always Josh Gordon week for me at 6,400. But it'll be interesting this week to see how everything kind of shakes out now that Gronk's back in the fold, because Josh Gordon's kind of been leading the team in his absence. So, but for me, I mean, it starts with Odell this week. I mean, if you're telling me that some guy off the street's going to be trying to stop Odell Beckham this week, I'm going to do whatever I can to get him into my lineups at 8,800. It's interesting, the thing you mentioned about Antonio Brown, because on Pro Football Focus, they have DraftKings ownership percentages on there, and they have him actually as the 4th highest on the slate overall, not just among wide receivers. He's 3rd among wide receivers. They have Mike Evans at 33%. T.Y. Hilton at 27%, and then Antonio Brown at 22%, actually lower than Odell at 20%. So that's interesting.
This is Fanshare that I was looking at.
Yeah.
They got OBJ and then Evans is number 2. Yeah. So pretty consistent up top. But yeah, there's a few guys that are in between there. Like DJ Moore is in there, Josh Gordon, T.Y., Edelman, Landry. They're all in between Brown and those top 2 guys on Fanshare.
But either way, I mean, he's in a fantastic spot. I know it's Denver at home, but AB, I mean, last week he had no ownership and had the long touchdown, which I played some AB last week, and I was getting a little nervous there until they that Steeler offense finally woke up and hit AB for that, what was it, like 7 touchdown. So help me out there. Anyways, so I think the rest of the slate gets pretty interesting here, because once you get past sort of these top guys, with Mike Evans, OBJ, Antonio Brown, I definitely think you could play Keenan Allen at 7,100, especially if Melvin Gordon isn't out there. Sign me up for Keenan Allen because I think he sees a ton of targets against Arizona. You're not going to have to worry about Patrick Peterson. Patrick Peterson has played in the slot less than 5% of the time this year, and we know Keenan Allen spends most of his time in the slot. So I have no problem with going Keenan Allen here. I think he sees a ton of targets. I don't really have a lot of love for some of these guys in the middle here. You can always play T.Y. Hilton, but outside of Josh Gordon, I would like to play Jarvis Landry. I mean, he's 5,900, but the dude just hasn't done anything in a while, and I don't know what his upside is for a touchdown. So I just can't do that. Marquise Goodwin looks like he's going to miss this game at 5,600. I believe he's probably going to be ruled out. So if he's out, I mean, I don't know who the hell San Francisco is going to throw the ball to, not named George Kittle. So, among the other guys, you have John Brown, who is dead with Lamar Jackson at quarterback. I mean, there's just not a lot here. So for me, I kind of want to pay up for wide receiver this week because I think it's kind of gross here in the middle sections because I'm probably not going to play any Philadelphia wide receivers. I just think there's too much to go around there. We see Jeffrey, we see Golden Tate, we see Nelson Aguilar, we see, I mean, Jordan Matthews is still involved in that offense.
Right.
I just think there's way too many mouths to feed there. And I don't know if you're ever going to be able to pin down which one to play, but I do think Sterling Shepard at 5,300, I think is a very interesting play. I do think he is interesting, especially if you don't, you can't get up to Odell. I definitely think you could play some Sterling Shepard. And the lower price tier of wide receivers this week, I do have some interest in Cortland Sutton. Cortland Sutton has last week, I mean, he wasn't awful. I believe, what do you have? I think he had almost 100 yards receiving. I think it was 3 for 78. I think you could talk me into some Cortland Sutton. And then if I'm paying down, I think there's a couple options here that really intrigue me and that I found a lot of in my lineups. And that one, starting with Adam Humphries at 4K. We know Jameis loves Adam Humphries. When Jameis is playing, Adam Humphries seems to draw a lot of targets. His biggest game of the year came with Adam Humphries, or Adam Humphries' biggest game of the year came with Jameis Winston, at 4K. I definitely think you could go there if you're not wanting to pay up for Mike Evans. If you can't get to him, we know O.J. Howard is out for the year. So I definitely think having some exposure in your stack with Jameis Winston to Adam Humphries or Cameron Brate, we'll get to tight ends, but I definitely think you could do that. So I really like Adam Humphries at 4K. I have him in a ton of my lineups right now. And then the other is Kenny Stills in the Dome. We have to remember now that Brock Osweiler is done. We're back to Ryan Tannehill, and Ryan Tannehill loves him some Kenny Stills. So right now, and we don't look like we have a ton of options here right now. Danny Amendola is questionable. Devontae Parker is questionable. So who are they going to throw the ball to? I think Kenny Stills could easily see 10 to 15 targets in this game. And if he does that at 3,900, I'm not super scared of anybody in the Indianapolis secondary here. So I think Kenny Stills is one of my favorite GPP plays at wide receiver especially at his price tag. You can easily fit him in everywhere. And last but not least, I probably have some interest in Quincy Enunwa coming off the bye, going against the Patriots in a game that they're going to have to keep up. I don't think they're really going to be able to run the ball too much. So at Quincy Enunwa with Josh McCown is a little scary, but at 3,700, I think you can do that as well.
I like the Humphreys call. I was kind of on Chris Godwin myself, just because he's another big body guy that kind of fills in for O.J. Howard being out. But I mean, Humphreys is kind of up there in red zone targets. You got Godwin and Evans lead the team at 9. Humphreys is at 8. And then Brate and Howard are both tied for 7. So, I mean, you have those 7 red zone targets from OJ that are going to go somewhere. And I would assume it just gets distributed among the 4 guys at the top. Mm-hmm. But I think Godwin makes a ton of sense as well, especially against a team that you can you want to attack with the outside receivers opposite of Sherman. And like I mentioned earlier, Deshaun Jackson's, he's the guy who mainly lines up on the right side, and he's going to get Richard Sherman this week because Sherman has played like 98% of his snaps on that side of the field. So Godwin and Evans are going to avoid Sherman. And while I do think that Humphreys is a great call, I like Chris Godwin as well.
Yeah, that Humphreys call is awesome, Kev. I definitely love that. And I'm just realizing how many cheap options there are to just get me to some of these high-priced guys that I love this week. So might be a couple stars and scrubs builds coming. Two guys I want to talk about before we move on to tight ends. One is narrative. You got Michael Crabtree going against Oakland. It is Lamar Jackson, so this isn't a narrative that I would usually be wanting to play, but I have seen some people talking about that, so I do think that's interesting. And then the Denver situation here, Emmanuel Sanders has just dropped so much. He's now, only 5,500 going against this Pittsburgh team, and that's a revenge narrative there, so to speak, as he's, played against Pittsburgh before and definitely likes to show out in those games. Are those either one of those guys ones that you guys would try and consider getting your lineups? I mean, 5,500 for an Emmanuel Sanders here, who pretty much is the guy for Keenum there in Denver, is definitely intriguing to me for sure.
I don't know. I mean, it's tough, right? Because we know Denver is going to want to run the football. Keenum's been awful this year, and it makes it tough. His price is nice. He will probably draw a matchup against Mike Hilton, who's actually the highest graded corner on Pittsburgh so far this year. Is graded higher than Joe Hayden. So, I mean, it's not a terrible matchup. I just don't know if the volume's going to be there for him. And I don't know what, in terms of like scoring, I don't know what type of game this is, because typically, especially in Denver, you see, teams where they're a little bit lower scoring here. And I don't really know what to expect from that offense. So I just don't think you have to do it with him. And Crabtree, no thanks. I can't play any Baltimore wide receiver with Lamar Jackson. I just can't. I think the highest targeted player last week, I think, had 4 targets. I just can't play any wide receiver there in Baltimore. I just think there's other options that make more sense. You could talk me into Christian Kirk before you could play him. I think you could talk, like I said, I think Cortland Sutton is in a better spot just because I think he has a ceiling with touchdown upside. And then some of these guys down below, I just think, I would much rather get on to, Chris Godwin, Adam Humphreys, Kenny Stills, or even a Dontrell Inman. We didn't talk about him, but he's really kind of, came on since he's been there. Since he's been there, he's got 7, 4, and 6 targets. Caught a touchdown last week. And if you're wanting to play Andrew Luck and you're wanting to pair him with somebody, I think obviously you start with Jack Doyle, but Dontrell Inman is a sneaky name too at $3,900 on DraftKings as well.
Yeah, I hear you, Kev. I don't want to play Michael Crabtree either, considering who the quarterback is, but definitely some low end options that we'll have to consider. Let's move into tight end and talk about this. Kev, I'm going to start with you. It's just week after week, you just continue to amaze me with your tight end whisper calls. So why don't you whisper to me some sweet nothings about a low end call that we could maybe get without having to pay up for George Kittle and Zach Ertz, who are in amazing spots, but I just always find it hard to pay up for a tight end. Might be worth it, though, with George Kittle this week.
This is one of the rare times, I think, this year that you could tell me a story and play 2 tight ends in your lineup and be ultra contrarian. Because I love the top 3 tight ends this week. Whether it's Zach Ertz, where I think recency bias, people aren't going to want to play him. His price of 6,400 isn't crazy. Going against the Giants have not been great against tight ends. I just think this is a smash spot for him. So I have no problem with playing him. I have no problem with playing George Kittle. I mean, right now they have literally nobody to throw the ball to. I mean, Pierre Garcon's out. They have no Goodwin. So, I mean, they're going to have to find a way to get the ball to somebody. And I think he is going to see a massive amount of targets at 6,200, but he's probably going to be the chalkiest tight end on the slate. And then you have Gronk, who I've already talked about, who I love. Whether you want to pair him with Brady or play him by himself, I definitely think this is a week to get him right. I don't think you would have him out here playing in this game if you've had some sort of concern. So I will have a fair amount of ownership spread out between these two. I may even have some lineups where I have both of them in there, because playing a Kittle, playing an Ertz, I think as you look at it, like, you're paying for him, somebody who can give you wide receiver 1 upside, but you're paying wide receiver 2 value for it. So I have no problem with paying either one of them. Now, going down, like I've already talked about, I think Jack Doyle makes a lot of sense. He continues to see the most snaps in this offense. Eric Ebron, has seen his role drop so dramatically since Jack Doyle's come back from injury. Jack Doyle sees more targets. So I really like Jack Doyle at 4,100. David Njoku has probably one of the best matchups on this entire slate at 3,800. He's probably not going to carry much ownership. Absolutely love him. And then, like, the other one that I would probably have the most interest in would be Cameron Brate. We know that Jameis Winston absolutely loves Cameron Brate and always is looking for him. So I definitely think he is in play, but I think he probably also, in terms of ownership, is probably going to be one of the more chalkier tight ends on this entire slate. So I think for me, that's probably where I stand, would be Doyle, Brate, and then, the top guys at the top.
Maddie, what say you this week, man?
I'm not playing Cameron Brate as the highest owned tight end on the slate. I can't do it. Like, give me Kittle or Ertz as the highest owned guy. Like, I can't play Cameron Brate. Like, that is just disaster waiting to happen. I mean, I get it. Winston has loved Brate in the past, but this year, granted, OJ had been on the field at the same time, but Brate's target share only jumped from 6% to 7% with Winston being in instead of Fitzpatrick. So the thing with Brate is you're hunting for touchdowns, and when you have guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Adam Humphries all getting red zone looks, and Brate's not even getting the majority of them. Man, it's just tough for me to play him as the chalkiest tight end on the slate. But I mean, I like the Colts call, which is also interesting because Mo Alley Cox is going to be out this week. So now you're going to see Ebron it probably spikes Ebron a little bit more. He'll run a few more routes and should see 1 to 2 extra targets than he normally would. Because Mo Alley Cox has been seeing some red zone looks here recently and stealing some touchdowns from these guys. But we know we can attack Miami through the tight end position. Ty is going to get Xavier Howard this week, who's been a very, very good corner this year. So you're going to see the Colts again look to move the ball through the tight ends and then through Marlon Mack, like we mentioned earlier. So I don't even hate Eric Ebron, who's currently projected at less than 1% ownership over on FanShare. Meanwhile, I think Doyle's like the 4th highest owned projected. So I think Ebron makes a ton of sense in tournaments, especially if you like Doyle, because we know Luck never seems to throw it to the chalky tight end there in Indy. So, but I mean, I'm going to do everything I can. We've already mentioned like a lot of cheap studs or studs that should be priced up that are not, like Nick Chubb and Joe Mixon and all that. So they open a lot of salary cap. So I'm going to do the best I can to fit in Ertz or Kittle this week. And I'll probably end up playing Ertz because it seems like the consensus of the industry is to play Kittle. And for me, it's just a flip of the coin. So I'm just going to play the guy that people are not on. And I mean, Ertz has, in my opinion, a higher ceiling than Kittle with Wentz at quarterback, playing at home. Kittle's on the road with Mullins. Ertz is going to be lower owned. A lot of recency bias with a 3-point dud against New Orleans at high ownership. Mm-hmm. So I think Ertz is my number 1 tight end this week, and I'm going to do everything I can to jam him in against New York.
Yeah, I'd never get to Zach Ertz just because I hate paying up for tight end, but I agree. Like, this is a great week. The first build that I made was a Wentz and Ertz stack because I just loved what I was able to do with it. with Josh Adams being there too, I guess, like you said, Maddie, at the beginning, it is a question of how much Philly exposure do you want. But I'm just not scared with. I'm never scared with a Wentz-led offense. So last week it just didn't work out, which is even more reason to load up on it this week. Kev, to your point with Rob Gronkowski, it's just one of those things. Like 5,100 is pretty much the cheapest that you're going to be able to play him at, like, ever. I feel like when he's out there and suited up, I just don't know how much of it will be decoy use. And we've seen him come back from injuries before and playing that first game and have his struggles. So it does concern me, but that's why, you play GPPs to kind of get an edge on the field. So if people are lower on them and you pair them with the Tom Brady, which is the only way I would play Gronkowski. Like, I wouldn't play him naked. I'm playing Tom Brady with him. It just makes sense to me to correlate it that way. Definitely makes some sense. I'm trying to think about who else I was thinking. Vance McDonald going against Denver. Do have some intrigue in that. You can, attack Denver through the tight end position. 2 back-to-back games with double-digit points for Vance McDonald. I know people get concerned with Jesse James being there as well too, but Vance just seems to kind of be that security blanket for Ben. So he could definitely find his way into some of my lineups there to be contrarian. It's just a little bit higher of a price tag than I want to pay for him at 4,300, but there's so many cheap options that we have across the board that I don't think there'll be. I think you'll be able to get him in. Trying to think what else I want to touch on here before we move on. Jared Cook, interest in either of you guys?
Not really for me. I can't trust really anything the Raiders are doing right now. And I mean, the matchup against Baltimore is kind of gross.
Yeah, on the road against Baltimore, no.
Yeah, no thanks.
I guess the only other tight end that I meant to talk about was Chris Herndon. I think you could play him at 2,900. If you wanted to pay down at tight end, I think he's in play. I really like him. He has shown, the ability, especially inside the red zone. I think he has 3 touchdowns on the year, seeing decent volume, and I think he's seeing 4 to 5 targets a week. So, in a game that I think that is going to be high scoring, at least on the New England side, and they're going to have to throw the ball. I think Chris Herndon makes some sense.
No, for sure. For sure. Let's sorry, I'm battling with chat as well too. Shout out to everybody who's in chat right now watching us live on YouTube. This is the first time we're doing it this season. We've done it before in the past, but definitely love seeing you guys' questions come in and comments too. We definitely got Addie in here who is really high on the mid-price tiers and is getting on me for my Landry call. So I appreciate the banter in that chat. And we want you guys joining us, and make sure you guys are following us on Twitter too, at DegeNation Pod, going on, rating, reviewing, liking the show. We're getting some good reviews in there and definitely some good comments with constructive criticism, which we love, as well as people just shouting out, my takes are better than Kev's. So really appreciate that as well. Keep them coming, guys. Let's move on to defense, because I do want to get to Trey Rice is in there, and Trey's been a fan of the pod all year. I want to get to one of the elements on DK. He wants us to try and go through one of these tiers contests. So I want to get to that. So let's talk about defense real quick. We'll do that and then close it out with our Millie lineup that we usually do. So defense this week, guys, Baltimore is one of my favorites, 3,300, going against this Oakland team that is just atrocious right now from an offensive standpoint. It just is too cheap for that defense. Really like the Ravens this week. Who else was I considering here? On the low end, Addie brought this up in chat, and I think it makes a ton of sense too. San Francisco on the road. Maddie, you're the one who talks about paying down on defenses, and I've kind of been the one to get to it. But it kind of is really contrarian there when you think about what Jameis can actually do from a ceiling standpoint. But if we do get turnover Jameis, like, this could really pay off a price tag here at 2,300. I think is very, very intriguing. And then the only other defense that I was kind of considering, just because we talked about it earlier on in the year, was the Buffalo defense at 2,700 at home going against Jacksonville. It doesn't make me feel comfortable at all. I actually would rather play the San Francisco defense, but the mid-tier defense kind of gets lost in the shuffle every time. And this is a Buffalo team that has kind of been off of the radar. So I don't think a lot of people are considering this and how good they were at the beginning of the year. But this Jacksonville team is just struggling all across the board, coming off of a devastating loss to Pittsburgh because the offense couldn't get anything done. Like, I think you have a team that's divided right now, and Blake Bortles is really playing for his time in Jacksonville. Like, he's pretty much on a clock right now, and a loss to Buffalo would definitely seal that for him. So this Buffalo team is legit. I mean, 25 sacks on the year. They've gotten interceptions. They got 8 interceptions, 7 forced fumbles. They played against the Jets and really shut them out, only allowing 10 points. And then they were, pretty good against that New England team, whose offenses that we laud. And they only, New England was only able to, or they got up 25 on them and still got 3. But, they started out that game pretty strong. So at 2,700, they're not really going to kill you too much, I feel like, and they do offer some upside here with some big scoring weeks. So, Maddie, what are you doing at defense?
Buffalo playing the Bills, man.
Let's go.
I've played them all year. They're middle of the pack in terms of pricing. 2,700. It's not too expensive, and it's not free, but it's not too expensive. So, I kind of like the 49ers call, and you could even play them. Like, if you have a Winston team and you get down, you got 2,300 left on your defense, you could even play them with Winston as your quarterback, because he could go out and throw 2 picks. One of them's returned for a touchdown, but he still throws for 400 yards and 4 scores. So I don't hate that at all, but I think I'm going to try to get up to the Bills if I can. They're the lowest that I'll probably go voluntarily. Outside of that, I like the Chargers with Bosa back at home against Josh Rosen. Especially if Gordon's out, they're going to have to rely on that defense to get pressure to win the game. So if you have the salary, I think the Chargers make some sense this week as well. And the Ravens, of course, at home against Oakland. That's a no-brainer for sure. But Chargers are a good pivot off the Ravens.
I agree. Yep. I think for me, it's going to be the Chargers or Ravens. Pretty clearly. I do think the Patriots are somewhat interesting, but I just don't know if they have the upside to get there at 3,100. But and then Steelers defense at 3K. I think you could do that as well. But in terms of like paying down at defense this week, there's not a lot there that excites me. Possibly Denver defense if you wanted to. Denver defense at home, we know is good. We know Pittsburgh on the road, especially Big Ben, has a tendency to turn the ball over. So if Denver defense at home, I think is the best place to play them. I wouldn't play them on the road, but at home, they're always an interesting play. Who are also $2,300. So I think if I was going to pay down, it'd probably be Bronco D.
Okay, I hear you, Kev. Let's try and get this tiers thing in for Trey before we get our Millie team close it out. So I'm looking at these contests. To be honest with you, Trey, and anybody else who plays tiers, I haven't looked at these all year, I should say. Played a little bit last year, but kind of haven't avoided. But some of these contests are very interesting to me. They got a lot of single entries in here, a lot of big money ones with low entry fields. So I might have to get into one of these. So I'm just going to pull up the first one that I saw, which was the 33 bootleg 1K to first. And let's go through some of these tiers. So it looks like the way they set them up is tier 1 and 2 are quarterbacks. You got 3 with some skill, you got tiers 3, 4, 5 that has some skill positions. 6, you start seeing the tight ends getting involved. And then 8 is some low price options. So I'm just going to rattle through these guys, and you guys tell me who your favorite play would be at each one. So tier 1, we got Ben Roethlisberger, Cam Newton, Andrew Luck, Jameis Winston, Tom Brady. If you had to play one, who are you guys playing?
I'd play Winston for ceiling. I think he's got the highest ceiling. And I would approach tiers as the highest ceiling and not the highest floor.
That's fair. Kev, what say you? Big Ben, Cam, Andrew Luck, Winston, Brady.
I would probably go with Brady, but I could easily go to James Winston too.
Brady's going to be the chalk there, so Winston's the good pivot.
You think Brady's the chalk?
I think Andrew Luck would probably be chalk.
I think Luck and Newton before Brady.
Really? Without salary? Because it's just straight up. You just pick one.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know. I mean,
I just feel like he carries a lot of name value.
That's fair. That's fair. Both of them. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this year, Tom Brady has not been great at all. I mean, Tom Brady has been pretty bad, actually, for the most part this season in terms of giving you upside, he's only scored. He hasn't scored more than 20 DK points since week 7. I mean, so
yeah,
I don't think he's going to carry that. I mean, he only has one game this year where he scored more than 30 DK points, and that was actually not against Kansas City. Surprisingly enough, that was against Indianapolis. So.
It's interesting to think about, but I do think that Brady will be lower owned than you would expect. But that's an interesting take. But yeah, for me, it'd be Brady at the top. For me there. Tier 2, and tiers are interesting because you get the Sunday night game. So we have Aaron Rodgers going against Minnesota, Phillip Rivers, Kirk Cousins, Carson Wentz, Russell Wilson. There's a couple guys here, but Russell Wilson, Baker Mayfield, Eli Manning, Lamar Jackson. So I know that was a lot there, guys. Rodgers, Rivers, Wentz, Cousins, Wilson, Mayfield, Manning, Jackson. Pick one.
Cousins for me. Green Bay defense has been so bad. And he lit the world on fire the first time they played in Green Bay. This is at home. Yeah, Cousins for me.
I would go Baker, but I like the Cousins call too.
Really? You would go Baker there? Okay. I respect it, Kev. I'm just shocked.
Matchup. The only thing I guess that would scare me is the fact that if they just let Nick Chubb just run all over him. So I mean, I could easily get on board with Kirk Cousins as well. So I think it would be between Baker and Kirk Cousins.
I would go. I think Rodgers and Wentz. Rodgers will probably be the chalkiest, I feel like, in that tier. That's the one where you're talking about name value and you see his game logs and he carries some weight. But Wentz, I think, in that tier is very intriguing because there's just so many other options to play. And because of what we were talking about with the Philly offense, I just think he definitely goes low owned in that tier than you would consider. So be Wentz or Rodgers for me there. Tier 3, we got 2 high price running backs, 2 high talented running backs, 2 talented wide receivers. It's Melvin Gordon, Barkley, AB, and Odell Beckham.
AB.
OBJ for me.
OBJ. Yeah, I would probably lean Antonio Brown too for that upside there. But if Melvin Gordon got ruled in, I would consider playing him because that ownership should be lowered. I think OBJ is definitely the chalky there.
Yeah, but we're not factoring in price here, right? So it doesn't matter. We're talking about in terms of, of overall just ceiling. I mean, I think Odell in this matchup has the biggest ceiling.
But also, you're also looking at Melvin Gordon there, who will
I think he has the highest ceiling of any of those 4 players, OBJ, this week.
Okay. All right. I respect that. Let's go into tier 4 here. We got a couple more options. We got Adam Thielen, James Conner, Christian McCaffrey, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, and Mike Evans. So only 2 running backs in this tier, which I think is very interesting. And you got 4 receivers, and you can only play 1. And of course, they put Thielen and Diggs in the same tier. So if you had to play 1, who are you guys going?
Thielen.
Connor.
Yeah. This one's interesting. I mean, Evans is too. This is definitely a big toss up. I'd probably go. I'd probably have to go Connor 1, 2, but it's tough. Thielen's in a great spot, and so is McCaffrey and Evans. That's a tough one. So that's a lot to think about there. But I'd probably go Connor first. Tier 5, we have James White, Juju Smith-Schuster, Julian Edelman, David Johnson, Joe Mixon, Keenan Allen, Leonard Fournette.
I'd say Mixon or Keenan Allen, depending on the Melvin Gordon news.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's exactly
what I think it's no question. You got to go Joe Mixon here. Julian Edelman does interest me though a lot, especially if you're paying for Tom Brady in that first tier. To pair them up. So that's what I will say there. Tier 6, we got Zach Ertz, T.Y., Aaron Jones, Jarvis Landry, Matt Breida, Josh Gordon, Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook.
God.
Tiers, man. This tiers contest.
These are tough. I'd have to say Nick Chubb.
Yeah. I think
he's got 35-point upside here. 120 yards.
Yeah.
2 scores. A couple catches. Maybe 3 scores. I don't know. He's got massive upside this week.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Chubb is great. He's up there. Josh Gordon, I think, is good in this tier too. If you don't want to play Edelman in that past tier, then I would get Josh Gordon in here with the Brady lineup. But then again, if you're playing Wentz too, you're definitely going to want to put Zach Ertz with him. So Ertz is in this tier, and yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. I think Nick Chubb could actually go low owned in that tier, which definitely makes that intriguing. Tier 7, you got Emmanuel Sanders, Marlon Mack, Tyler Boyd, George Kittle, Alshon Jeffrey, Phillip Lindsay, Sony Michel, and then Goodwin, but we know Goodwin's out, so you can take him off of that. But Michel, Lindsay, Jeffrey, Kittle, Boyd, Mack, Sanders.
Mack for me in terms of ceiling.
I like Kittle.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to go Mac, I think. But I would definitely consider Kittle and Sanders too. I mean, Sanders in that tier is really speaking out to me because of the ownership there. But Kittle makes a ton of sense, and so does Mac. So I wouldn't mind either one of those plays either. And then the last tier we have here is Golden Tate, Deshaun Jackson, Tyler Lockett, John Brown, Sterling Shepard, DJ Moore, Duke Johnson, Doug Baldwin.
Tyler Lockett. If Baldwin's out.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I would probably go. Oh, man, that's tough. Honestly, I think you could take a shot on, if you don't go Nick Chubb in another tier, I think you could take a shot on Duke Johnson.
Yeah.
In this one.
Sterling Shepard for me.
Yeah, he would be my third choice.
I would probably lean to go Duke because I don't know how much Chubb I'd get to. So that would be my option, just to pivot off of that. And your team is going to be in good positions for the teams that go with Chubb. But that might be an easy way for me to get exposure to DJ Moore too. But definitely interesting to see what happens with the Seattle situation because, yeah, Lockett would be in a great spot if Baldwin misses. So the tiers there, that's definitely something to think about. We'll have to look into those contests after we get off the pod when I start building some more of my lineups because I'll probably have some ownership there. Let's go back to defenses real quick, guys, before we build this this Millie lineup. And somebody in the chat, let me just go back and see if I can find it. Somebody wanted to talk about the Colts D, I believe, before we got off. Yeah, this was Addy here. Before you're done, give me your quick thoughts on Colts D. Miami is built like Tennessee, and Indy hammered them. Tannehill's banged up, Drake is banged up, and they have average wide receivers. What are we doing with Colts D?
You absolutely can play Colts D, and I think they make for a great tournament stack with Marlon Mack. I think that's going to be very contrarian, but could be a very profitable build.
Kev, that interest you at all, or not so much?
I don't hate it at all. I don't know. I mean, it's tough. Last week was unusual. Compared to, so the previous 2 weeks before, what defense are they? The 2 weeks before, Jacksonville with Blake Bortles and Derek Carr lit them up. And, you know, I'm not that Ryan Tannehill's a great quarterback, but I do think he's fully healthy. They wouldn't have brought him back if he wasn't. They've kind of been avoiding it, you know, for the last 3 or 4 weeks. So I do think he's 100% healthy, and I do think it's an upgrade. Not that Ryan Tannehill is great, but I also don't think this defense is great. And they're not a defense that really gets to the quarterback. Last week was unusual. I mean, they had 5 sacks, but I mean, that was kind of what we saw earlier in the year. Then it sort of fell off. I don't know. Like, I think you could do it, but they're not 25 or what were they last week? $2,500 like they were last week. This week they're $2,900, and I think that's close enough. There, I would rather just pay up for the Ravens or the Chargers at that point. So I probably won't have much of any of Colts.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think for me there's other defenses in good spots. So it's hard for me to get there with them. But you know, if you're playing GPPs, that's what you want to do, is have a contrarian play, and I don't think too many people will be on the Colts D. So definitely interesting there. Let's go into the DK Millie build that we do, and we weren't able to do this we did it, but not for the Millie team. We built a team for Thanksgiving, and we're going to bring back the Millie build here for the Week 12 main slate. And this is where we put our heads together and come up with the best plays that we can for this Millie team. And it's very rare that we do a Saturday Millie team build. So I'm curious to see where our plays get us on. So let's do that Millie team on DK right now, guys. And let's go ahead and Kev, why don't you start it off for us and get the build going here? What position are we starting with?
I'm gonna lock in OBJ.
OBJ. All right, let's get him in. So OBJ is our first receiver off the board, 8,800. Maddie, go ahead.
Josh Adams.
Love it. Makes a ton of sense there. I'm gonna go Christian McCaffrey at 7,900. I do like this Carolina team to put up points here. And not sure how much I want to play Cam now. I have to rethink this, but Christian McCaffrey's just been so good as of late. So I think you can definitely see him being the highest scoring running back this week.
Okay, I'm gonna lock in Tom Brady at 65.
All right, Tom Brady goes in at 65, top quarterback on the slate. That leaves us 4,600 for our remaining positions.
Josh Gordon.
Nice correlation play, Maddie. That's what I would have done as well. So now we're sitting at 4,100 for our final 4 plays. I'm going to take an easy route out here because I'm curious to see what you guys do, and just put in the Bills D at 2,700. So leaving these 3 positions for us, 2 skill positions for you guys, 4,600 per. Kev, I think it's on you whenever.
Oh, okay. I thought it was many.
You're good.
I want to exposure this game, so I'm going to go Adam Humphries.
All right, Maddie, tight end or flex? It's on you.
4,900 apiece, so.
Let's go.
Got a pretty interesting build here.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go Ebron.
Okay, Ebron at 4K, so 5,900. Ooh, y'all left me with Jarvis Landry there, who I do love. But to be honest with you, I'm really liking Sanders, so I'm going to play Sanders there at the flex spot at 5,500. I just have a good feeling about him in this game, and that price tag for him just feels too cheap. We good there, team?
Yep.
Boom? All right, so that's Brady, Josh Adams, Christian McCaffrey, Odell Beckham, Josh Gordon, Adam Humphries, Eric Ebron, Emmanuel Sanders, and Bills D, leaving 400 on the table there. We'll go ahead and lock that in, and that is going to lock it in for the Week 12 Main Slate podcast. Kev, Maddie, you guys got any final words for everybody before we sign off?
No, just thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm excited for tomorrow. Should be a fun slate.
I totally agree. I think without the Chiefs or the Rams or the Saints or the Falcons on the slate, I think it made it very interesting. And I think there's so many different ways you can go, which makes it different, which makes it tough, which is the way I like it. I don't like whenever like everything just kind of flows to one game. I don't think there is that like just amazing game on the slate where you just want to get all your ownership from. So I think it makes it pretty interesting.
Yeah, this is a good week for me because I feel like I'm gonna want to build a couple different lines like I do. So it's a great week to multi-enter. I feel like I'm already getting my teams into that 20 entry $3 max, and we'll have some exposures to other single entry lineups as well elsewhere. But yeah, guys, this was fun. Live on YouTube, the DegeNation pod. It'll also be recorded, and that will be out probably by morning, Kev, I should say, that people can go back and listen to it if they want. And obviously, it will be here on YouTube if they want to rewatch it.
Well, yeah, it'll be out tonight. I'll probably have it done here in probably an hour or so. So also, got to plug the Slack chat. If you want to get on our free Slack, reach out to us on Twitter, and we'll get you in there as well.
Yeah, reach out on Twitter, guys. And if you were, watching on the show, give us a like on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast, make sure you're downloading the pod, rating and reviewing it, letting us know what you have. And if you're new to the show and you were in our YouTube chat, leave us your Twitter handle, DegeNation Pod. We'll get you a follow back and get you a shout out as well too. And this was fun, guys. Week 12 main slate. It's going to be interesting. This is we're pretty much 15 hours away from lock. So very, very nice to get one pod out to the masses right when our processes are pretty much solidified. But we're going to catch you guys for week 13. And hopefully you guys have a profitable week. Again, DegeNation Pod signing off for Kevin Steele at FantasyRat13 on Twitter, Maddie Dickinson at Maddie_D_30. This is Ryan Alexander _W on Twitter. And we will catch you guys next time. Good luck tomorrow. We out.